You know what's wild? We built the perfect machine for creating charismatic people and then spent decades systematically breaking it. Think about it for a second. For the majority of human history, kids grew up in communities where they had to figure out social dynamics on their own. They played outside unsupervised, negotiated conflicts without adult intervention, and learned to read people because their survival in the social hierarchy depended on it. Fast forward to today, and we've created these institutions where young people spend thousands of hours together, which should theoretically be the ultimate training ground for developing social intelligence. Except somewhere along the way, we decided that the primary purpose of these institutions wasn't to help kids become well-rounded, socially capable humans. Instead, we optimized for something else entirely. Here's the thing that nobody wants to admit. We took the one environment where charisma should develop naturally, and we filled it with rules specifically designed to prevent the exact behaviors that build charisma. Sit still for 7 hours. Don't talk unless you're called on. Raise your hand and wait. Keep your voice down. Stay in your assigned seat. Follow instructions exactly as given. Don't question authority. Don't be too energetic. Don't be too expressive. Don't stand out. And then, we wonder why so many people reach adulthood feeling socially awkward and unsure of how to connect with others. We literally trained it out of them. The uncomfortable truth is that charisma isn't some mystical quality that only special people possess. It's a skill set that was supposed to develop automatically through normal human interaction, the same way language develops automatically when you expose a child to conversation. But just like you could theoretically prevent a child from learning to speak by never speaking to them, we've managed to create an environment that actively suppresses the development of social skills. And the kids who end up being the most charismatic as adults, they're often the ones who ignored the rules, the class clowns who risked attention to crack jokes, the chatty kids who couldn't help but socialize even when they were supposed to be quiet, the ones who got in trouble for being themselves, not because rule-breaking makes you charismatic, but because they prioritized human connection over compliance, even when there were consequences. Now, I want to be clear about something because this is important. You absolutely can develop strong social skills while being respectful and considerate. There are plenty of people who managed to navigate the system without constant rebellion and still came out charismatic. But here's what they all have in common. They found ways to practice being human. Whether it was through extracurricular activities, social groups outside of school, or just having the kind of personality that naturally seeks out interaction, they got their reps in. They learned to read facial expressions, to calibrate their energy to a room, to tell when someone was genuinely interested versus just being polite, to recover from social mistakes, and to make people feel valued in conversation. These are learned skills, and like any skill, they require practice. So what does actual charisma look like when you encounter it in the wild? Because I think most people have a distorted view of what it means to be charismatic. They picture someone loud, extroverted, always the center of attention, cracking jokes and commanding a room. And sure, some charismatic people fit that description, but the truly charismatic people I've met in my life, the ones who leave you thinking about them hours after the conversation ends, they have something more subtle going on. They make you feel like you're the most interesting person in the room. When they talk to you, they have your complete attention. They remember details about your life that you mentioned weeks ago. They ask follow-up questions that show they were actually listening. They make you feel seen in a way that's rare and valuable. Let me give you an example that really stuck with me. I once watched someone charismatic in action, and it was like studying a master craftsman at work. This person needed help moving some furniture, and instead of just asking anyone nearby, they specifically approached someone I knew had been feeling overlooked lately. The request itself was simple enough, but the way they framed it was fascinating. They used the person's name, which immediately created a sense of connection. They smiled genuinely, not that forced social smile we all recognize, but a real one that reached their eyes. They phrased it as asking for help rather than asking them to do the task alone, which created a sense of collaboration. They mentioned that the item was valuable, and they didn't trust just anyone with it, which was a subtle way of communicating trust and respect. And here's the kicker. They specifically chose to ask someone who they knew would feel good about being needed in that particular way.
Every single element of that interaction was designed to make the other person feel valued, but it didn't feel manipulative because the intention was genuine. They actually did need help, they actually did trust this person, and they actually were grateful for the assistance. That's the key difference between charisma and manipulation. Charisma has positive intent as its foundation. You're not trying to extract value from people or trick them into liking you. You're genuinely trying to make their experience of interacting with you a positive one. You're thinking about how your words and actions affect others, and you're choosing to make them feel good whenever possible.
Here's something most people don't realize about how humans work. We don't primarily remember what people said to us, or even what they did. We remember how they made us feel. You could have a conversation with someone where you discuss the weather, weekend plans, and absolutely nothing of substance, but if that person made you feel appreciated and valued, you'll walk away with a positive impression of them. Conversely, someone could say all the right things and give you accurate information, but if they made you feel stupid or unimportant, you'll remember them negatively. This is why charisma isn't really about being clever or funny or having the perfect thing to say. It's about emotional impact. So instead of going into social interactions wondering what you can get from people or how you can make them like you, flip the script entirely. Go in wondering how you can make them feel good. What can you say or do that will brighten their day, even slightly? How can you avoid making them feel bad, insecure, or uncomfortable? This shift in perspective changes everything because it takes the pressure off you and redirects your focus outward, which ironically makes you less anxious and more charismatic. But I need to pause here and give you a critical warning because this is where a lot of people go wrong. Do not interpret what I'm saying as permission to become a compliment-dispensing machine who showers everyone with obviously fake praise. People have finely tuned sensors for detecting insincerity, and nothing will tank your social standing faster than being perceived as fake or manipulative. If you start going around telling everyone they're amazing and wonderful when you clearly don't mean it, people will spot it immediately and they'll trust you less than if you just stayed quiet. So here's the actual approach that works. Give genuine compliments, and I mean genuinely genuine, not compliments you think you should give or compliments that sound nice, but compliments based on things you actually appreciate about the person. Here's the secret though, this isn't actually hard to do. If you pay attention to people and really listen when they talk, you will naturally notice things you genuinely like about them. It happens automatically. Your brain is already doing this. The problem is that most people notice these things and then immediately suppress the impulse to say them out loud because they're afraid it'll be weird or awkward or too much. But that's literally the only barrier. You're already thinking the compliments. You just need to give yourself permission to voice them. Not every single one, obviously. Some thoughts are better kept internal, but the appropriate, kind ones, say them. That's the whole trick. Another crucial element that nobody talks about enough is the importance of banter. And I don't mean the British definition involving tea and crumpets. I mean the ability to engage in playful, teasing exchanges that signal mutual comfort and trust. When you banter with someone, you're communicating that you're comfortable enough with them to not take everything completely seriously and that you trust them to understand your intent. It creates a sense of closeness that pure politeness can never achieve. If your friends are perpetually polite with you, never teasing, never playfully challenging you, never engaging in any lighthearted back and forth, something feels missing. There's a wall up. You might respect each other, but you're not truly relaxed around each other. This is one reason why making friends as an adult feels so much harder than it did as a kid. Everyone's standing around being carefully pleasant, exchanging safe observations about the weather or weekend plans, making sure not to say anything that could possibly be interpreted as offensive. It's exhausting, and it doesn't build real connection. Real friendship requires some degree of vulnerability and playfulness. You have to be willing to be yourself, which includes being occasionally silly, sarcastic, or irreverent. But here's the critical distinction. Banter only works when both people are enjoying it. If you're making jokes at someone's expense to make other people laugh, that's not banter, that's just being mean with extra steps. Real banter is fun for everyone involved. So how do you banter without accidentally crossing lines? Start with topics you know the other person won't be sensitive about. Their sports team losing, their harmless quirks, things they've already joked about themselves. You can playfully exaggerate their strengths, turning something they're good at into an absurdly over-the-top compliment that makes them laugh.
You can make statements that are so obviously false that everyone knows you're kidding. The key is that it has to be obviously playful, and you have to be willing to receive the same energy back. If you can dish it out but can't take it, that's not banter, that's just you being difficult. There's also a darker side to social mistakes that everyone makes at some point. You think of what feels like the perfect joke or comeback, something so clever you can already imagine everyone laughing, so you say it, and then there's silence. Or worse, there's that subtle shift in energy that tells you that you misjudged. Maybe it was too harsh, maybe it was poorly timed, maybe it just wasn't as funny as it sounded in your head. We've all been there, and it's excruciating. The good news is that these mistakes are actually how you learn social calibration. The bad news is that there's no shortcut. You have to be willing to occasionally miss the mark and learn from it.
Now let's talk about something that separates truly charismatic people from those who are just pleasant to be around. Anyone can give a compliment. Anyone can be polite. But if you want to genuinely stand out, you need to show interest in people's actual lives. Ask them about their interests, and then, and this is crucial, actually listen to what they say. Don't just wait for your turn to talk. Don't mentally rehearse your response while they're speaking. Actually pay attention. People love talking about themselves and the things they care about, but most people rarely get the chance to do so with someone who's genuinely interested. When you give someone that gift, they remember you. If you really want to take this to the next level, here's an advanced technique. Remember things people tell you about their accomplishments or interests, especially the ones they don't usually get to talk about. Maybe someone has a hobby they're really into, but they rarely mention because they assume others won't care. Maybe they achieved something they're proud of, but they feel weird bringing it up. When you reference these things later, especially in a group setting where they get to share it with others, you're giving them a moment to shine. You're telling them that what they said mattered enough for you to remember. That's powerful. But here's what I think is the most underrated aspect of charisma, and it's something most people completely overlook. Actions speak louder than words. Not just as a general life principle, but specifically in the context of making people feel valued. You can tell someone they matter to you, or you can show them through your behavior. Invite them to things, ask for their help with something, which shows you trust and value them. Give them a thoughtful gift that shows you pay attention to their interests. Offer your help when they need it. Follow through on commitments you make to them. These actions communicate care and respect in ways that words alone never can. When someone goes out of their way for you, when they remember something small you mentioned and act on it, when they make time for you even when they're busy, that's when you think to yourself, wow, this person actually cares. That feeling is what creates lasting connection. That's what real charisma generates. It's not about being smooth or having perfect social skills. It's about consistently making people feel like they matter. The tragedy of our current system is that we could have had this automatically. The building blocks were there. The environment was there. The time was there. All we had to do was let natural social development occur. Instead, we built institutions that prioritized obedience and conformity over human connection, and now we're surprised that people struggle socially. We're surprised that young adults feel lonely and disconnected. We're surprised that anxiety around social situations has become so common. But it's not surprising at all when you realize we've spent decades training people to suppress the very behaviors that build social competence. The good news is, it's not too late. These are skills, and skills can be learned at any age. It might feel awkward at first. You might make mistakes. You might say something that doesn't land the way you hoped. That's all part of the process. Every charismatic person you've ever met had to learn these things, usually through trial and error. They weren't born with some magical social ability, they just got more practice than most, either because they ignored the rules that prevented practice or because they found environments outside the system where they could be themselves and learn from real human interaction. So start small. Practice giving one genuine compliment each day. Actually listen when someone talks about something they care about. Ask follow-up questions. Remember details about people's lives. Try engaging in light, playful banter with friends when appropriate. Notice what makes people light up versus what makes them withdraw. Calibrate based on feedback. Be willing to be yourself, even if it means standing out a little. And most importantly,
Go into interactions with the genuine intention of making the other person's day better, even in some small way. Charisma was supposed to be automatic. The system was supposed to produce socially capable, connected humans as a natural byproduct. It didn't, but that doesn't mean you're stuck. You can still develop these skills. You can still become the kind of person who makes others feel valued and seen. You just have to be willing to practice, to make mistakes, to learn, and to prioritize genuine human connection over playing it safe. That's all it takes. That, and maybe a willingness to occasionally carry a pressure washer for someone who really needs your help.